Hello there, and welcome back to Hydroponics Daily, your go-to podcast for everything soilless cultivation. I'm your host, Dr. Russell Sharp, and today I'm going to be talking about a subject that I am not an expert in, but which I hope to be more of an expert, not an expert, but hopefully a master of in the coming year or so, and that is the culture of carnivorous plants hydroponically. Now, my two sons are mad for Venus flytraps at the moment and other carnivorous plants. They can't stop watching YouTube videos of carnivorous plants. You know, Daddy, show us the video of the snail getting trapped in the Venus flytrap and such videos, ridiculous, stupid videos, and I pander to them. So I've recently bought a Venus flytrap and a couple of sundews and a pitcher plant. And I'm going to see, as well as growing them in my greenhouse and in my grow room at home, I'm also going to be seeing if I can grow them hydroponically. So without any soil-based or peat-based growing media. There have been a few experiments with growing sort of semi-hydroponics where they've used peat and cocoa recirculatory systems, but there doesn't seem to be much out there about hydroponics. There's a couple of issues that make it really difficult to grow carnivorous plants hydroponically and why they're not grown commercially hydroponically. So they're ornamental plants, so they're grown as, you know, something to look at and admire, but they are not like other plants in that they are actually native to very, very nutrient deficient bogs, acidic bogs normally, and all around the world in the tropics, in the temperates, and even up in the fairly north in Canada as well, some species. And there are species in most countries around the world, but the most interesting ones are like the Venus flytrap, which I think is from like North Carolina, South Carolina in the US, and then the pitcher plants, which grow, you know, I've seen them native in California, but also the whole of North America. Now, there's two different types of pitcher plants. There's the North American type and the Asian type. And the North American type are a modified stem, whereas the Asian type, they come on the ends of a leaf and they've evolved separately. It's called convergent evolution, where you get the same type of structure forming, even though the plants are unrelated. Same with cacti and euphorbias. They both look like a cactus, but one evolved in Africa and one evolved in America. Completely different genetics. Aloes and yuccas, I think are convergent evolution. So that's important from a hydroponics perspective because it's actually the tropical pitcher plants which are going to be more suitable, I think, to hydroponics, because the North American carnivorous plants and the European carnivorous plants will need to die off in the winter. And so they're not going to suit that continuous growth in a stable grow room environment. Whereas tropical species that don't die off, and what we call herbaceous perennials, where they die off and they go dormant in the winter, they're not as good for a grow room environment because they need that winter period. Now, something like a Venus flytrap or a North American pitcher will survive maybe one winter being grown in a grow room, but eventually it will die off if it doesn't get that winter period. So I'm going to try cultivating the Venus flytraps for a year and then give them a rest period. And then the sundews, I'll do the same. I've got a tropical sundew, what's called a Drosera. That's the scientific name for it. And they sort of have the honey like dew on their leaves and then curl up to sort of catch the prey. Whereas a Venus flytrap, everyone knows what a Venus flytrap is. You know, the hairs get activated and they close dramatically on their prey. Where the pitchers, hopefully they'll be coming soon, and hopefully we can get some propagated and grown in completely soilless, completely peat-free, cocoa-free. We'll try and grow them in rock wool in either NFT or DWC. I'll probably try a bit of both. Be interesting to see. I am no expert. I'm not claiming to be an expert on this, but it'd be interesting to play around with, and it'd be very interesting. The other thing about carnivorous plants is you don't need to actually feed them animals and meat. They will survive without being fed any animal tissues. They can be completely vegan. I think you can even feed them tofu and things like this as a source of nitrogen. But my kids will want to feed them flies because they are sick and twisted children, as want to feed their plants insects and things like this. So we'll be playing around with them. So that's one thing to consider. The reason why hydroponics has failed probably in the past is that you don't actually want to feed them much nutrition. These plants, all carnivorous plants, they die when you give them too much nutrition. And so you almost want to be close to pure water. We definitely don't want any high calcium. So it's going to be RO water because these are thrive in acidic conditions. So what I'll probably do is do a bespoke formulation of gold leaf, or liquid gold as it's called in the UK, take the pH down and do like 0.2 of a mil per litre, or like, half a mil per gallon of fertilizer, and really keep that EC level really, really, really far down on this one. And then the other thing to consider is that I think around 20 years ago, I read a report, 15, 20 years ago, that Kew Gardens, the biggest and best botanical gardens in the world, in London, they went completely peat-free apart from their carnivorous plants, because they considered peat to be essential for carnivorous plants, and sphagnum moss as well, the use of sphagnum moss. And I don't want to be using peat, I don't want to be using sphagnum moss, so we'll try and get away from that. And then, ironically, that pests can be a problem in carnivorous plants. You get a lot of scale insects and aphids that don't get trapped in the traps and are able to feed off the carnivorous plants. So those pests can be an issue. So I'll have to make sure when I get the plants in, I'm obviously not going to grow these from seed. I'm going to grow them from plants I brought in from nurseries and then divide them up as they get bigger, and hopefully, give the pups away to people who want carnivorous plants, or some grow shops, people like that. I've got to make sure they're completely pest and disease free. So they'll be quarantined before they go into my grow room for a number of weeks. So that's definitely completely pest free. That's the main one. Disease, less of an issue, because they'll be specific probably to the particular plant, and they won't infect any of the other plants in my grow room. So that's something I'll be considering. Might collect some seeds. If you didn't know already, carnivorous plants are very interesting. They produce their flowers on very long stalks, so that the pollinators, the bees and other things, the moths that pollinate them, don't get trapped in their traps. So they separate their flowers from their traps by a very long distance. So they have a long, what's the word? Pedicel? I think it's pedicel. The thing that holds a flower up, out, away from the stem. I didn't Google that. So if it's right, I'll take the kudos for it. If it's wrong, apologies. What else can we say about carnivorous plants? Will certainly be an update when I've learned more about how to grow them. There are lots of different varieties of Venus flytrap. However, they all belong to the same species, and really it's about colour and spine length and things like this, just to make them more ornamental. I've gone for a bog standard variety to begin with, so hopefully they'll grow. Some of the more obscure varieties of Venus flytrap don't actually trap any insects because they've mutated, and they don't have the hairs or the spines and things like this. There's lots of different species of pitchers, sundews, urticaria as well, I think, like just plants that have sticky leaves that catch prey. A lot of plants are what also considered like semi-carnivorous, like teasel, where they don't actually have traps per se, but insects get caught in their where the leaves touch the stem, and they've got like little ponds of water, and then the plants can absorb nitrogen from them. Same with bromeliads, things like this. They have like a reservoir of water between where the leaves join the stem, and they're considered like sort of semi-carnivorous. I'm not so interested in those. I want something that will move or trap an insect and look really, really cool. And the sundews and the Venus flytraps and the pitchers, they're the three types of plants that look really cool and do that. Some people have said that including carnivorous plants would be a good strategy for natural biocontrol in a grow room or in a greenhouse. However, you've always got to balance that between, are they attracting pests and flies and things into your grow room, or are they controlling the flies and pests in your grow room? Could be that they are actually, causing by having attractants, giving off chemical attractants, actually causing more of an issue. And as I've said, they can get scale and aphids and things like this, so they're not killing all insects. They're only collecting a few insects and very few over a period of a year as well. So I personally, it's an added complexity, so I wouldn't use them and grow them just for pest control. I'd use them more as an ornamental plant, as something cool to look at. They're going to be non-mycorrhizal because they grow in acidic bogs where there's no oxygen, so fungal connections will be not a thing. They might have a few bacterial connections, but they're not going to be mycorrhizal, so don't be putting any mycorrhiza on them. It's going to be a waste of time and effort and money. I would have thought they can tolerate fairly high light levels because acidic bogs, there's not much tree cover on an acidic bog. So I'm going to give them a fairly good whack of light. And watch this space. I'll probably update you on how I'm getting on. Probably have a few mistakes and mishaps along the way. As I say, I'm not an expert on everything. And, if you want expertise, go to ChatGPT and that'll pretend to be an expert for you. But, I'll just give you my experience and my thoughts. As always on Hydroponics Daily. If you found this interesting, if you want to know more, please get in touch. If you want me to clarify anything or you've got any information about carnivorous plants and hydroponics, then please do let me know. And if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, please leave us a review because it would mean the world, because it would shoot us up the charts as always. Thank you very much for listening. Until tomorrow, goodbye.